In this lesson, we're going to show you how to connect a capacitor to the potentiometer. It's common in all guitars, whether it's a humbucker or a single coil, so it's a good skill to know. I'll cover a little bit of the simple ways you can wire it, but please check the wiring diagram to make sure that it does match up with your particular model and how you want to wire up your guitar, because there's many ways that you can do this, and I'll show you a couple of the more common ones. But let's dive in and we'll show you how to connect the capacitor. Let's start with the Les Paul wiring. Now there's a lot of ways you can wire a Les Paul, and we recommend that you actually do a little research and figure out what's going to best suit you for your guitar and your style of playing. One of the most common things that we recommend is the wiring the Les Paul with a connection between these outer lugs here. So for instance, if this lug was our volume pot and this is our tone control, we would first connect a wire from this outer lug to this outer lug here. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because that will determine how we connect the capacitor. And so in that configuration, the capacitor is going to be connected from this middle lug to the back of the potentiometer, and this would be our tone control here. So it would look something like this. So if I would take my capacitor and take the lead wires, and you want to make sure that the lead wire is not getting grounded by the casing here. So it's real easy to add too much length to this, and I don't know if you can see this, but this wire is breaking on to the back of the potentiometer, and that's going to ground that out. So we don't want to do that. We want the circuit to run through the capacitor and then ground to the back of the casing. So one way to do that is to make sure that this capacitor lead wire here is pulled up far enough so it's not going to accidentally touch that casing. Now another thing that you can do is you can add a little bit of shrink tubing. So if I have something like this, is just some plastic tubing that I can apply over that little lead wire there, and then when I thread it through that middle lug, it's going to protect that wire from shorting out, grounding out to the casing here. So there's a couple ways to do it. If you don't have the shrink tubing or the tube, plastic tube like that, that's fine. You could also use a little bit of pushback cloth, like you can see here. I took some of that cloth portion of the wire, pulled out the center wire, and then I can use it as a shielding for this capacitor here. So there's a couple different ways to do that, but let's assume that you don't have any shrink tubing or cloth available. Again, what you want to make sure that you do is you pull that capacitor far enough to that lug so it won't touch, and I basically am kind of laying the capacitor on the back of this potentiometer, as you can see here. This is what they call a ceramic disc style capacitor, and again I can, once I get it to where I feel like it's in the right location where it's not touching the casing, then I can bend this wire and that'll hold it in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder that connection, and then that'll allow me to then bend this wire to the casing and solder the other location. So I have the capacitor ready. All I'm going to do is just solder that middle lug here. I've bent the wire around and I've tinned my iron so the heat transfer is going to be nice. I'm just going to feed a little bit of solder through there. And it doesn't take much. You want to move quickly with capacitors because they can overheat. You can use a heat sink, like a little bit of alligator clip, to attach to capacitor lead wire right here. And we have a video that covers that. Now that I have this wire here, I can just kind of move these wires around a little bit to get the capacitor a little bit in a better location. I'm just going to bend this wire around here. And now what I can do is I'm just going to attach this other end of the capacitor to the casing right about here. And I don't need a lot of solder, just enough to attach it to the back of the potentiometer. So as you see here, we have some excess wire here, and that's fine. What we can do is take our wire cutters and just cut those ends off here, like that. I can do that on both sides. What's nice is I can actually use this extra wire to ground out the potentiometer if I need to. It's a great use for that extra wire there. On a Stratocaster, we can actually use the capacitor to connect the two potentiometers. We can use the same capacitor for both of the tone controls. So if these are both our tone controls, so this would be used for our bridge, this one could be used for our neck and middle, depending on how you have it wired. But here's how we can get away with using one capacitor, and this is real standard in Strat style guitars. You'll see this a lot. Is I'm going to use this outer lug. I can connect this outer lug to the middle lug of the second tone control. So basically I'm using the capacitor lead wires to connect these two. And I'm just going to thread this through, and it looks something like this. And one thing you want to make sure when you're wiring it this way is that this lead wire doesn't touch the casing here. So if you want, you can use a little bit of shrink tubing, something like that. But if you're careful enough and it's threaded through enough that you won't, it'll be far enough over so it won't be touching the casing. This, at least this, what I'm referring to is this side of the capacitor. This section here we don't want to ground out. So, and I will trim this off once I get it soldered. So I'm just going to start with one thing at a time here. I'm just going to wrap this lead over, get everything more or less in place, making sure that's threaded through. And I'm going to start, I like to start with this one because once this one's connected, it's easy to, it'll keep everything in place. So I'm just going to add a little bit of solder right here. Okay. Great. Then I'm going to solder the capacitor to the back of this pot here. And I'm going to do it right here just so it doesn't overheat the capacitor. Just a little bit of solder will work. The next thing I need to do is just solder this last little bit. It looks like this. Great. And then I'm just going to trim off this excess wire here. Remove anything. And I'm going to trim this excess wire off here. Great. So there we have it. That would be our typical Strat style, our two-tone controls. Our volume would be kind of located right over here.